Yes, we have no bananas. As you may know, this chapter title is from a popular song in the 1920s that had the same name, and it actually happens to be perfectly appropriate for what we're going to talk about here, as you'll see. Suppose you were buying a new home or an expensive car. What would you do? You would ask questions. And before agreeing to anything and making a deal, most likely you would look closely at all the details. What about the details of the very life you are? To begin seeing how the sensory illusion works, first look at how it normally appears. The everyday world certainly does seem to consist of many solid, separate physical objects. Two such items would be the audio device you're now listening to this on, let's say, and the body that's now holding it, or the body that's now seated listening to it. Other objects could be the furniture near where the body may be seated. A shoe appears to be a type of solid object too. So do most everyday items like a fork and a spoon, a cinder block, or a banana. Trees and mountains appear to be solid objects. And on it goes. Supposedly, the grandmother physical object of them all is Earth. Strange as it might seem, that's the illusion. It appears as if all these things are out there and separate from you here as the body. It also appears as if all these objects are separated from each other by physical distance and have space in between them. That's part of the illusion too. Like a good detective, closely examine the scene. Notice every bit of evidence for this so-called physical world of solid objects. For example, how can it even be said there seems to be a body here right now listening to this voice and experiencing such a world? First, notice how it all depends on the five senses sensing everything. There is a seeing or a visual sensing of the world. There can be a hearing of what goes on in a world. There can be a touching or tactile feeling of a world. There can be a smelling and a tasting of it. All evidence, repeat, all evidence testifying to the so-called physical world of solid matter can be traced to the five senses. If you have a doubt about this, work through it yourself. Try experimenting with different types of objects or things and see if there's any alternative, and there isn't. The point is that this sensory evidence seems so powerful, it can be very convincing. And usually, it is all that gets noticed. That's only because certain other things have gone unnoticed. To expose this sensory illusion, consider a basic everyday item. Let's say it's a nice yellow banana and you are eating it. In everyday life, did you ever notice why it is even believed there are such things as bananas? And notice if a thought comes in response to that statement. Wait a minute, it's not just a belief that there are bananas, it's a fact. Okay, that's what we're going to look at. On what is this fact based? Again, like the detective, consider all the evidence there is for any banana's existence. And we'll see how it's all based on the five senses. By the way, as we go through this, you may wish to go pick up a banana from out of the kitchen while this is being read, and I would suggest not doing that if this type of exercise or deconstruction is new, because it's easier to get it first just by following and listening to the steps, going through them that way. Again, it's recommended just listen for now. Back to the banana. What usually gets noticed first is a specific sight or visual sensation. Obviously, there is an image or appearance to any banana, and in this case, the image is one of basically yellow color. And you can notice how the shape of this yellow color, this image, gives the banana its, what we would say, oblong appearance. And if you look really closely, one thing you notice is that all that's really being seen is color. That's all that's there, is color. Visually, with this same image, there also appears to be a slight curve to it. The yellow color has a curve. And this image of yellow shape is how a banana is visually distinguished from other items, such as a finger or a flashlight. This image or visual sensation of yellow is an essential piece of evidence for saying a banana is there in the first place. Stop to consider it. If there were no visual image of a banana, but somehow you still had the feel of a banana and the taste and the scent, it would be kind of strange, though, if there were nothing there that you could see that you were eating. You would have a totally different concept of what a banana is. Notice what happens simultaneously when experiencing the visual sensation or yellow image. Sensations of touch or different types of tactile feelings can also be experienced. If a banana were held in the fingers, you can imagine this at the moment, there would be a specific feeling of, let's say, texture to its surface. We will use a word smooth, let's say, but try to feel, or maybe recall a time when you have held a banana, eaten a banana, which hopefully, probably you've done many times. Just recall that feel before you peel it. I think that there was likely to be a certain type of a residual memory, almost kind of feeling there. That's what we're referring to. It's the feeling, not the word smooth, but the feeling that we're going for here. And that feel is different from, say, a piece of sandpaper or a cotton ball. There's another variation to the tactile sensation of a banana, and that involves the feeling of weight or heaviness when you hold it. It's different from, say, holding a brick, or, on the other hand, maybe a drinking straw. Feeling-wise, there also is a certain sense or feeling, tactile feeling, of temperature, different from an ice cube. And the feelings supposedly are various types of evidence that there's a solid object being held there. In particular, right now, just notice that these are all feelings. Watch what happens when dealing with this tactile experience purely in terms of the feeling. In other words, don't automatically think of this banana feeling experience in terms of two separate items, which we usually do, meaning the fingers and the banana that they supposedly are holding. Don't look at it that way. Just deal purely in terms of the feeling. Deal with that sensation alone. Notice that if the eyes were closed, only one overall sensation or feeling would be experienced. If you're dealing in terms of pure feeling only, there isn't any evidence of two items, fingers and a banana. There's only one overall feeling, and no place can be noticed where fingers leave off and banana begins. There's just the one overall feeling. There might be nuances to the feeling, as we said before. These are the temperature, the feeling of weight, and the texture. And notice also how that feeling, those various feelings, always would be changing if the banana were moved about in the fingers. The feeling, too, notice this, it's always sort of passing, moving on, changing to a different type of feel and a slightly different type of feel, shifting from one to the next to the next. They're sort of flitting as they come and go as the banana is moved around. Here's another thing to notice closely. The feeling in and of itself, all by itself, would not be considered a solid object, would it? No, it's just a feeling. It's not a material, physical item. It's just a feeling. We're not talking about the fingers. We're not talking about the banana. Just talking about the feeling. The general belief is that this feeling is a feeling of something else. Supposedly, this feeling is from a banana. But for now, notice all that's there is a feeling. Notice also the specific sense of taste with a banana if a bite were taken. It's different from the taste sensation of a carrot. There's a pleasant scent to a banana too, different from, say, gasoline. And there even may be a slight sense of sound, such as when the skin is peeled off or maybe when chewing. And notice that even when chewing and swallowing, the soft texture in the mouth and throat really is just another type of tactile feeling. Even though it's inside the mouth and not the fingers, it's a feeling of touch just taking place inside the mouth. Now, what happens when all of this sensory activity occurs at once? Each of the five senses contributes its particular, we'll say, aspect of the banana to the overall experience. There are the visual color and therefore the shape. There are feelings and taste, smell, and maybe some sound. And when some or all of these five sensations are experienced, simultaneously we tend to have the thought, a banana is here. Maybe we don't even think it consciously, but that's really what's going on. There isn't any sense or feeling that it's a brick is here. Here is the thing to notice about this process. This exact same process is what goes on all day long with all things. In a similar way, the senses combine their activity in the experiencing of every kind of item, from bananas to books to bicycles. It applies to your cell phone, to your toothbrush, to your coffee cup, whatever it might be, to the steering wheel on your car, to anything you can mention. It's all sensory activity. Even right now, there seems to be an experiencing of some kind of visual image as the body sits listening to this audio, tactile feelings of maybe being seated and doing something, and also sounds from this voice. And this same thing goes on moment by moment with every single item, every single minute of every single day, except when you're asleep. And obviously, this sensory experience is how the so-called human mind experiences its entire world and universe and all the things supposedly in it. Just going back, when the particular combination of banana sensations occurs, it's what thinking labels as the experience of eating a banana. Now, look deeper. Exactly what is the substance of the banana? What does a banana itself consist of? To not be fooled, we're going to look quickly once more at all the evidence for a banana. There's the visual sensation or image of yellow, tactile feelings, there's a taste, a scent, maybe a sound. And these sensations are all the entire evidence for saying that a banana exists. There is no other evidence. Now, leave the sensations aside for a moment. Ask yourself what the substance of the banana itself is from which this sensory experience supposedly is coming. What makes up the banana itself entirely apart from those sensations? Take your time if you need to really sort of ask yourself, well, what is a banana made of? When you try to come up with what a banana is entirely separate from the sensations, what happens? You don't come up with anything. And why don't you come up with anything? Because there isn't anything. There are only the sensations. If this is new, you are encouraged to look as long as you want. The answer invariably is the same. Sensations alone are the only quote-unquote substance for this entire experience. There are not both the sensations and a separate banana. There never is a solid, separate banana object out there having its own existence as a standalone physical material item. There is no separate object from which any sensations are coming. At most, there is only the experiencing of some passing sensations, which would be entirely a mental phenomenon, we'll say. Go over this as often as necessary for it to be clear. What this means is that a so-called banana isn't really a solid physical object at all. There is no such item having its own independent material presence. At most, the so-called banana would consist only of sense perceptions or mind stuff, like a thought, or, say, a dream. It might be more accurate to call it a thought banana, because during this entire sensory experience, it is as if thought were saying, a banana is here. The exact same thing can be seen in reverse. First, take away the experiencing of the 5 sensations. Now see if it's possible to claim a banana is still present. It's not. So what does all this mean? A banana, so-called, as a separate solid physical object didn't go away anywhere. No such separate object ever was out there in the first place. Never has there been any such item having its own independent existence. At the bottom of this page, there's a paragraph in italics referring back to what I said at the beginning about not actually holding a banana, and I'll read it now. At first, it may be best to just read these last few noticings several times. It is not necessary to actually hold a banana and try to unsee it. The sensory conditioning can seem strong and hypnotic, and it can. So it may be easier to be clear about this by first going through the examples without holding a banana, what seems to be a banana. And then later, if you want to do it with an actual banana, feel free. It still will work the same way. Again, because the conditioning seems so powerful, it's hard to work through sometimes and see that this object that appears to be here isn't really here as a separate object. Until this illusion is exposed, naturally, one is likely to think of a banana as a solid separate object. Yet notice that it can't be said that a mere image of yellow color is a separate physical object, because again, an image would be only a perception, or like a mental thing. There are not both the image of yellow and a separate object that is giving off the image of yellow. Always, there's only that image. In the same way, a passing tactile feeling is just that, a mere feeling. There is not also a permanent solid object anywhere from which the feeling is coming. There's no item giving off that feeling. There are only these fleeting, passing feeling sensations which, in and of themselves, don't constitute a static, separate physical item. Think it through. Neither is a sensation of taste, or a sound, or a smell, in and of itself, a separate solid object. Obviously, the way the illusion seems to work, it forms an appearance of being a separate solid object that is out there. But the only substance for a banana would be a purely mental process, experienced only as perceptions, or you might say thought. There are not both the perceptions and a banana, as if a banana were separate. There are only perceptions as banana. Interestingly, in the human scene, this noticing that so-called objects really are not separate physical items has been known to philosophers and sages for centuries. Just very quickly, two philosophers, one is David Hume from, I believe, in the 1700s, wrote about this in his work, and also the British George Berkeley, they say it Barclay, for whom Berkeley campus in California is named. He had quite a body of work on this very subject. Even though it's been around for quite a while, usually it's considered esoteric or is limited to experts, and that's why it's not more widely known. On this same basis, it also has been widely debated, particularly among philosophers, where all human experience seems to be occurring. They've debated whether or not all human experience is going on inside the mind or outside the mind. There's another way of looking at it in which it's neither inside nor outside, but one in which the banana or any so-called item literally would be the mind itself in operation. It's not something separate from the mind. And by the way, in the use of the word mind here, it's not meant to, that's a tricky word, so we ought to define it a little bit. It's not meant to imply that there is this separate entity called mind or a mind. What there is, what there seems to be, are thoughts and various types of sensations, the 5 that we spoke about, and other feelings. These are all phenomena, or you could say things that arise, types of experience that arise, including emotions and other things. And they're all just individual aspects of experience. And sometimes when they're all combined, that is what is considered to be the mind. But it's not like there is this other separate entity called mind in which all these things are contained, or in which is having all of these things. There are only these phenomena when you look closely. That's all there is. There's awareness, certainly. Then there are these apparent phenomena, but that's it. Nothing else. Back to this inside and outside the mind debate for just a moment. When the sensations associated with banana are experienced, it can't be said that the sensations are produced by a banana that is outside the mind or separate from thought. We've seen there's no separate item there to be outside or to produce sensations. And you can also look at this in reverse. If it were not for that particular seeming item, or let's say banana, that specific package of sensations wouldn't seem to occur either. Those same sense perceptions would not be experienced with what we call an onion or a baseball. The so-called banana and that particular activity, the experiencing of those specific sense perceptions that we walked through, they seem to need each other. And that's because they would be like opposite sides of a coin. The way to see it is that this mental or sensory activity doesn't know about a banana as if it were something separate. The mental activity of the sensations, that literally is the banana. Even the very discussion and explaining of this point, using the two words sensations and banana, makes it sound like two separate things. But there aren't. It would be one phenomenon. Here is the most important point to notice. This isn't only about bananas. This same basic illusion applies to all items experienced in daily living, as we said earlier. It applies to cell phones, to computers, to beer cans, to birthday cake, dollar bills, automobiles, bodies, everything. It even applies to the planet itself. The significance and the scope of the sensory illusion might seem kind of staggering the first time you see it. And it might feel as if it really sort of rocks the boat. But it only would be because a seemingly age-old belief in a separate physical world has been rocked. That's what's been rocked, not you. You haven't been rocked. The belief has been rocked. So, don't be surprised if, on seeing this, that a bunch of new questions come up. They should. This is now an entirely new kind of world and life.